much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the 166th session of Majlis Khonji via Zoom. Please allow me to introduce our guest for this session, Mr. Minshall, a private consultant principally for critical national infrastructure, the founder of Mayamn and associate of Cityforum, and a member of the Anglo-the Omani Society and Omani British Business Council. He spent 25 years in the British Army, during which time he served in Oman from 1987 to 1989. Since then, he has maintained strong links with Oman, and he is a member of the Sultan's Armed Forces Association. He has been a private consultant since 1999, and his chosen role is to match requirements with innovative capabilities for Oman. He writes occasionally for travel and other journals where his increasing interest on water security and renewable energy. He is the founder of Mayamn Water Project, which aims to harvest water from the air in a manner which is fully sustainable. Today, he will talk about sustainability, focusing on climate change, the human challenges, and the way forward to live sustainably. Thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Matt, to Majlis Khonji, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that charming welcome, Your Excellency and honoured guests. It is my great pleasure to be here present at Majlis Khonji once again, and this time especially as I'm doing it from Oman, the first time. It is really wonderful to be back. During COVID, I missed my frequent travels to Oman, but I hope to make up for that this time. It's always such a feeling of warmth as soon as you arrive in Oman, although this time I was on Oman Air, so the warmth and the welcome had already started. But it's like a business holiday. I come here for work, and yet I feel that I'm relaxing with friends every time. So thank you again for allowing me to be in this wonderful country. Some of you may remember my previous talks. The first was during COVID, and it was on the subject of resilience, which was on behalf of Cityforum, a think tank of which I am an associate. It's growing in reputation now, and much of its time is spent addressing direct issues requested by the British government and sometimes the US government. And we bring in speakers of note to talk about relevant subjects and to answer the questions that key decision makers need to be helped with. And my role is to bring in a wider audience, a wider selection of the world's experts. So I'm speaking with the French government at the moment and the Danish government to bring in a wider perspective. And it is my deep wish that we can include Oman in some stage in this endeavor. Inclusion from Oman carries enormous weight. The political approach of neutrality, no enemies, and the deep diplomatic influence is really significant. And of course, it's often done without public acclaim. And I have absolutely no doubt that the recently announced accord between Saudi Arabia and Iran was achieved with significant assistance from Oman. That is, I'm sure of that. My second talk was focused on water, and this remains my passion. I recently had an article published in the Crisis Response Journal with the title, "What is Water Worth?" And I went through what is water, why we need it, and the simple answer was, as it is the foundation of survival, it is priceless. You cannot put a price on something you need to live, and yet we do. Most of us take water for granted, and yet some of it is not readily available, and people's existence is entirely focused on simply finding water in order to survive. And yet, under the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, it is a human right, and therefore should not be subject to political or unreasonable commercial influence or control. I say unreasonable deliberately. It cannot be free. Somebody has to pay for it, but it should not be a power tool, as I'm sure you would agree. So today, the subject is sustainability, but it is, as we will discuss, it is linked to resilience. And I'm going to cover it broadly under three aspects, which is the impact of climate change, the human challenges, and perhaps some ways forward to live sustainably. Much of it I know you will know, but it's simply perhaps a different take on how we approach it. Key thing I learned from school, which I have never forgotten from the age of 9, was a school teacher who said, don't treat things in isolation. Everything is linked. So you may not like mathematics, you may not like geography, but they're linked. Calculating geography is linked to mathematics. Mathematics is linked to history, to economics. Everything is linked. Treat it all as one big lump of plasticine, one big lump of clay. Use it all together, all at the same time. If we go down one track, one path, perhaps we lose ourselves in the darkness. So, sustainability and resilience are part and parcel of the same person. Sustainability is the responsible management of our resources. And by sustainability, we seek to improve our environmental, social, and economic impacts. Sustainability is the ability to continue important functions indefinitely without declining quality. As we grow as a human race, our expectations become greater. We must make sure that we sustain everything to ensure we continue to enjoy life at a good pace, at a good rate. On the other hand, resilience is the ability to thrive in the face of change. One of the things that perhaps I felt wrong at the end of COVID was people, particularly in Europe, saying, now we can return to normal. There is no normal. Normal was yesterday. We only have today, and we have to look to tomorrow. Normal is fleeting. It only happens today. Tomorrow is different. We get older, things change. We have to adapt, and this is resilience, the ability to keep going. So together, sustainability and resilience identify today's key social, economic, and environmental goals to create systems that enhance rather than those that degrade us and the world around us, and that can withstand the inevitable shocks from the environment and technological changes. We've seen huge impacts in the last decade, from COVID to wars, climate change. We have to look ahead, we have to adapt, we have to change, we have to become stronger, resilient. And we have to, by doing this, we've got to understand the whole systems, not just the individual pieces. And we've got to be able to use quantitative and qualitative data to make the choices. Being able to work with diverse stakeholders to build consensus around plans for progress. This is the important thing, consensus. We have to work in synthesis. And we have to have the ability to develop specialized skills to bring the ideas to fruition. And we must do it in a way that is fair. We cannot develop our own ability, our own social lives, ignoring the parts of the world that are less fortunate. Sustainability is really then about survival. Survival is ensuring that we have enough of the critical resources for sustainment. For humanity, my passion, the critical resource is water. But we will not be able to supply the growing quantities of water needed without a concomitant supply of energy. Energy must also be provided in a sustainable manner and collectively. And this is what we seek to do, and that is what the future is all about. Everything interconnected. Humans will only survive in harmony with themselves and with nature. When this coherence fractures, sustainability is lost. So collectivity and collaboration are the keys to sustainability. And this is achieved through the synthesis of strong leadership, which is clearly demonstrated in Oman. I know of few other, if any, other countries that has a vision so cohesive to looking at the future. It is bold, that is sure, and there will be impacts of change. But with good leadership, these impacts are reduced because it is explained. It's not that I want you to do this, it means you must do this. and I will lead you to do it. And that, I think, is the clear message from His Majesty Sultan Haytham, as it was from His Majesty Sultan Qaboos. So now if we look at the impact of climate change, which I know is apparent, but I'd like, again, to show it perhaps from my perspective. So global climate change is mainly due to global warming. This is happening with or without humans. It is a process over the last 4 billion years. Since we broke away from the sun, the planet has been changing. It's been getting hotter and colder, colder and hotter. We are now coming out of a cold period still over millions of years. The remnants are the ice caps, but the world is getting warmer. We can adapt, but the biggest problem is the humans are making it warmer faster. So the warmer temperatures over time are changing the weather patterns, disrupting the usual balance of nature. Nature, though, is far more resilient than we are. Nature will adapt. It may take a while, but nature is our strength. But this poses great risks, quick risks to human beings and all life on Earth, upon which we rely in many cases. Hotter temperatures mean that all land areas are seeing more hot days and heat waves. This is apparent in Oman. I was speaking to an Omani friend last night, and he said, you may have noticed our summers are getting longer, our winters are getting shorter. This is an impact. Higher temperatures increase heat-related diseases. Changes in temperature cause changes in rainfall. You'll get more severe and frequent storms, which cause flooding, which cause damage, and it's costly to the environment, to the economy. We have to pay more simply to survive. Although there is more rainfall, water is becoming scarcer because it's not in the right place at the right time. Becoming scarcer in more regions, and the droughts can cause destructive sand and dust. Deserts are expanding, reducing the land for growing food. Many people now face the threat of not having enough water frequently. People have to walk 5-6 kilometers a day simply to get enough water to survive. The oceans soak up most of the heat from global warming. This is melting the ice caps, raising the sea levels, and this threatens coastal and island communities. The oceans can absorb a lot of carbon dioxide, which is good for the atmosphere, but it makes the water more acid, and this endangers marine life. Marine life, like all other life, it's a cycle, it's a balance. When this is endangered, there is a concomitant impact on everything else. So I won't go more about climate change. I think you probably know it better than I do. It was simply to understand my perspective where I see it. So perhaps to focus now on the human challenges. This is a sustainable parable. You know, a parable, a figure of speech, represents a short story, typically with a moral lesson at the end of it. News stories or real events can be likened to a parable in providing an example or lessons. I'm sure you are aware of the old Greek parable of Pandora's box. Pandora was given a box, told not to open it. In the box were all the evils of the world, but her curiosity made her open it, and she released all the evils into the world. So what I've tried to do is put that parable into our problem, the human condition. My way of looking at it is that nature understood that too much carbon in the atmosphere would destroy her work. So she placed surplus carbon into boxes of safekeeping in the ground and the seas, allowing all flora and fauna to live healthily. Unfortunately, mankind's ignorance and greed encouraged the smashing open of the boxes, and the carbon escaped to the detriment of all. That is partly what happened. Trees absorb carbon in exchange for oxygen. It's a good exchange. And yet we make, out of trees, we make paper and cardboard, use them once, throw them away. Newspaper, you read half of it, you throw it away. This is not good. Technology is helping. Personally, I don't remember the last time I read a newspaper. I do it online. But somebody somewhere has to pay for the technology, the cost, and the ecological impact of that technology. But yet, the trees cut down are still used mostly, more than anything, for cooking, for heating. The incredible impact of packaging is deeply detrimental, and that is stifling growth. I remember 30 years ago, the desert covered in blue plastic bags, which were harmful to goats and camels. It started a long time ago. And yet, perhaps one of the most deadly misuses of carbon is diamonds. People desire diamonds more than anything. It seems small, but I wonder how many people have died for the value of diamonds, from the mining to the stealing to, in fact, wars have effectively been fought about it. In Sierra Leone, I was the military attaché in Sierra Leone during the war there, and it seemed to me that everything revolved around diamonds, the need for diamonds, the value of diamonds, and it's sad that use of carbon should have such an impact. I believe now genuinely that nature has retaught mankind that to survive, it's got to repair those boxes and put the carbon back where it can do less harm. But it remains a crisis. And only a move to a more sustainable world can really hope to address this. Sustainability in all things, from water and food, through housing and shelter, to industry and the economy, must be managed in a manner which at least allows parity of give and take between humanity and nature. We're never going to beat nature. It seems to me that many years ago we declared war on nature. We're never going to win that. Nature is a billion times more powerful than we can ever understand. The example I would use, where I live in France, the horizon is covered by a maritime wind farm. It has 80 turbines, which are 150 meters high. It covers an area of 10 square kilometers. It is a huge undertaking by man. It is producing 480 megawatts. It is significant. And yet, I look above it to a single cloud, a cumulonimbus cloud, the Great Thunder Cloud. In that cloud, there is a million times more electricity than that wind farm will ever produce. The cloud holds up to 500,000 tons of water at any point. Around the globe, there are probably 10,000 cumulonimbus clouds popping up, which nature creates in a matter of minutes. And you look at the disparity between man's achievements and nature, we can't compete, and we should not. What we should do is ask nature to help us, harness nature to help us. And that, I think, is what nature is reteaching us to do. If you look at, the idea of the power of nature, up until the invention of the motor car or the train, the fastest that man could travel was the speed of a horse. That's sustainable. And then suddenly we found ways of going much quicker, much faster, but not in line with nature. And everything we did had a huge impact. The manufacture of the cars, the trains, and the emissions were detrimental. We were starting to fight nature. So how do we move forward to live sustainably? Firstly, I think we should accept that nature is our master, and that anything we do must be with her permission. In terms of practicality, reducing carbon emissions is absolutely vital. There is no question of that. And certainly those that can, must. The countries that have the wealth and the technologies to conduct swift biotransition must do so with all speed. We've got to do that quickly. It's a matter of survival necessity. We must replace the forests, or we create new ones. We need to plant 10 trees for every one we cut down. In some places, this is happening. In Norway, for example, they have been replanting trees at a rate of 4 to 1. So 4 trees planted for every one cut down. But Norway is a small country. Compared to the devastation of the Amazon rainforests, I'm afraid it has little impact. Where trees are not possible, wetlands are a really good example of an alternative. The Mayamn project in Oman is a great example of this. It's inspiring. It will help reduce the local temperature, which will have a wider effect as it grows. It will reduce carbon because the natural flora will absorb it. And eventually, it will create a microclimate which will bring rainfall. In the UK, 400 years ago, we drained huge areas of marshes. Those areas now have been good for farming for a while, but they are now retreating. Nature has said, okay, you have something for a while. Now you have to go back to what I gave you in the first place. So they're now recreating the wetlands, the marshlands, because a lot of that is a very good way of absorbing or holding carbon. In Ireland, the peat bogs contained masses, billions of tons, but they started cutting them open for fire. Dried peat is used to burn. This has exposed tons and tons of carbon into the atmosphere. It's got to stop. But this need that we have, we can't simply impose it on all nations and regions. We can't tell all countries just stop emitting carbon. It is not fair. Some of those areas are totally dependent on fossil fuel based. Oman is at the moment, but the vision shows that it understands that and is diversifying rapidly and very effectively. If we say to countries that do not have that ability or that vision, it's not going to work. It's simply going to cause tension. India and China, for example, probably have 500 million people for whom a living without a negative carbon economy at this stage means they would have nothing, absolutely nothing. We cannot impose that on them. So, I mean, UK, for example, if UK disappeared, the carbon emissions would have no effect. The lack of carbon emissions would have no effect on the world. It's a tiny percentage. What Britain can do is provide the technology for other people so that they can adapt as well to survive. So those who can must do what they can in reducing the problem and leading by example. Again, I go back to Oman. Oman is leading by example, saying, look, we have gone from this position. We are transitioning fast. We're doing it, and we accept that there will be an impact, but we have to do it. That is a very good leadership example globally. What we must do is provide the technology for alternative energy and food sourcing as swiftly as possible. We must also teach conservation. Water and food waste are phenomenal. I would suggest that half the world gets half the food it needs, while the other half wastes half the food it gets. Simple things like when you let the shower run in the morning, waiting for the water to get hot, 10 litres of clean water run to waste. Multiply that simply by the population of Oman. That means every morning, 50 million litres of clean water simply disappear. And that's clean water. This is water that has been sourced, extracted, cleaned, transported. That has a huge impact. I tried this at home last year when we had a very long period of unusual heat. Every morning, while the water was heating in the shower, it went straight into a bucket. We calculated that that would save us 10,000 litres a year easily, and that water we then put onto the garden for the vegetables. It's a thought. Even teeth brushing. When I lived in Zimbabwe, I was told, turn the tap off while you're brushing your teeth, otherwise you'll waste 3 liters of water. I think this is well known now, but it's something to think about. Every time you turn the tap on, water that has been taken maybe from the sea, maybe from the thalage, or maybe from bottled water, all of which has been extracted, cleaned, transported, packaged, you just throw it away. This is my favorite subject, water, I'm afraid, so it's something I will go on about a great deal. Because the fact is, there is plenty of water in the world. There is far more than we will ever need on the world. But the challenge is, it's not always in the right place at the right time. Even though only 1% of all the water on the globe is available easily as fresh water, that is enough for everybody for the next 20,000 years, but it is not in the right place. If you take just the Caspian Sea, there is enough water in that sea for all of humanity without recycling it for 10 million years. But it's not available globally. So we need to think deeper. We need to think locally. Think of rainfall waste. Again, I calculated from my house when there is a severe downpour, maybe 500 to 1,000 litres just pours off the roof and disappears down the drain. This is grey water. This water can be used for the garden. It can be used for flushing toilets. There's no reason why you need clean water for that. This is where we need to think laterally. We need to have toilets which do not use 9 litres every flush, but 1 litre. Combine that with a vacuum pump, and you'll save water. We'll save 90%. When water falls as rainfall, a lot of it's absorbed into the soil. That is good. It's needed. A lot goes into rivers. That is part of the cycle. But a lot simply runs away. I have witnessed many times water pouring down the side of Jabal Akhdar. Great. A lot of it goes into the thalage and is used, but a lot of it is also wasted. Natural. But in Oman, they're building dams. Dams are perfect, except with heat, it evaporates. So we need to capture that as well. Thinking laterally, I mentioned the cumulonimbus cloud. There's the same energy in one of those clouds as, to make a comparison, 10 square kilometers of solar. In each cloud, 500,000 tons of water. How do we get it? We have to think about that. Education across the globe must be key, and collaboration in every way is the only way forward. In physical terms, collaboration means using everything available collectively and in synthesis. Solar energy is a key way forward, but it needs light. Wind energy, another excellent thing, but it needs wind. Hydrogen is a magical way for the future, but it'll take quite a long time for the technology which allows economic production, safe usage, safe storage, and safe transport. Oman again is leading with this, but again, the effect of hydrogen will take possibly 2 decades to be really effective. But to start now is vital. Desalination in areas of water challenge is essential, particularly when you're blessed with a coastline like Oman. But it needs power, it needs filtration, and the clean recycling of waste products, salt, and the pollution in the ocean. So with the main ones, we need to have lateral and alternative energy technologies such as to make up as gap fillers. Perhaps offshore floating wind farms, because they can be much bigger, and they have much less impact on sea life of the surfaces, the seabeds. Wave energy is another one. Wave energy, for the same footprint, can produce 10 times as much as electricity as wind or solar. The technology has not been very good up till now, and I know it's been tried in Oman before. But the new technologies manage it. So there's a firm I'm working with from Norway that I'm introducing this week. And even the swell, any movement of water, it will work. So there is no downtime of energy production. So wave and floating turbines are two examples of lateral thinking. We must also look at the use of plant-based liquids rather than chemical-based liquids. We've got to replace toxic chemicals for filtration. We cannot afford to use acids and bleach to clean. There are alternatives. They're more bulky, but they have no impact on the climate, no impact on ecology. Another example is you can make water bottles out of starch, out of corn starch. And once you've used them, you can use them a lot more times than you can plastic bottles because they don't become dirty. And once you finish with them, they go into the food recycling. They will compost. On this tactical collaborative approach, my concept of Mayamn, which I've mentioned before, is the concept of synthesis, but it's focusing on supplementary provision. It's not going to provide an equivalent of desalination or the massive solar and wind farms of Oman, but it can help to fill the gaps. The idea is to bring everything together at the same time. And I'm giving a talk on this at the upcoming Oman Sustainability Week. And I'm also exhibiting there with some of the technologies. So far, it brings together capabilities from Austria, China, France, Norway, Finland, South Africa, and the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. And more are following as people become interested in the concept. And it's more the smaller technologies which can grow. I began this project with harvesting water from humid air. And the trials so far look very positive. The idea is the technology is not difficult for this. When you hold up a glass of cold water on a humid day, the condensation which forms on the outside of the glass, that's the science. It's just condensation. The old air conditioners that used to rattle and drip outside your house, that is the same technology. It's simply a condenser. But a lot of the technologies, people have simply tried to convert an air conditioner into providing water. The company I'm working with worked from the bottom up, and he said, I need to produce clean water. That is my aim. And everything else came with it. So this can now provide domestic up to industrial capabilities focused on that. It needs power. I bring in power to do that. Wave energy is possible. Mobile solar, all these things are possible. But Oman has actually known of this technology. In Salalah, they use mist nets, so big nets which catch the water and it goes into containers. You can get 1 million litres of water during the Harif, but it's temporary. You need something that is greater. And one thing perhaps people have not recognised globally is that if a country is very dry in terms of water availability, it doesn't mean it's not humid. And Oman is one of the most humid countries on the coast in the world. It has humidity, which is fantastic for this technology. I think the average humidity on the coast is about 64%, which is high. And this means you can produce water all the time, pretty much. Even if it's not daily, weekly, you will get a fixed return, yearly, definitely a fixed return. I'm working on this with both the public and private sectors here. And the idea, it's not rocket science, it's simply reminding people we need to work collectively together. And it can provide everything from domestic and health to disaster relief, both at home and abroad. Again, taking the concept of Oman, of helping others, this is ideal. It will also help boost the economy, because all the technologies I bring to Oman, the requirement I insist on is that they will have local content from the start. And ideally, as many are very, very much hoping to do, is to manufacture in Oman as soon as possible. So the product becomes Omani. It helps to satisfy domestic needs, and then provides an export capability as well. So if there's a summary to this, because I think it's more of an ongoing discussion, an enduring, hopefully prevailing discussion about what we, the responsible people, need to do to survive and to ensure survival long enough so that we can relearn to live with nature. Sustainability then is all about survival. Without it, we're not going to survive. Resilience is about adapting to rapid change and long-term change. And they're both absolutely intricately linked. And if there are messages coming out of it, we must think and work in synthesis. We must work collaboratively between us, between nations, between regions, and globally. Certainly, we must reduce carbon emissions, but they must be replaced by eco-friendly technologies. We can't just stop emitting carbon. We're too dependent upon it, but it must be a transition. We must share the technologies in order to avoid economic gaps and tensions. Going back to my passion of water, there is evidence from the last 5,000 years where water has been a trigger for war. Most recently, I would suggest that Darfur in the Sudan, a lot of that tension was about the right and the control of water. It must not be allowed to be a political tool or an economic power. And finally, I would suggest that if there's a final message, it is that we have to plant more trees and turn the tap off when you're cleaning your teeth. I know that's been quite short. It was my fault because I didn't manage to get the presentation technology. But I hope that is of interest to you, and I'd be delighted to discuss this further with you now and any time other than that. Thank you very much for your time. I hope it was of interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matt, for this interesting and very comprehensive talk. Dear guests, we are opening the floor for the Q&A session or for any discussion. You may raise your question or your interpretation in the chat or by using the raise hand option in Zoom. Thank you very much. We'll start with Dr. Ramin. Fadal.
Matt, thank you very much for this very comprehensive and you covered a very large topic in a very short time, very comprehensively. Thank you. I just have a few points and I wanted your thoughts on it. And I'm sure you covered it and I missed it, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts. One is that I think with all the issues that you mentioned, and for the sake of this topic, if we as people, as governments, as people, if we look at other species and we look at all other species as one, that's the only time that we'll give the trees the importance, the environment the importance, and the other creatures. It's not in this respect only. It's not us and them. It's we're all one. The second thing is, I think it's not just about the dependence or interdependence between humans and other species. I think one of the ways or roads to success is when the independence of people on each other is focused on as well, because none of these will be attained if there are wars, conflicts, and everything else going on. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Sultanate is so involved in treaties and arranging peace between different areas in the region. because without it, none of the things that we want to focus on, even if it's not directly related, will not be impacted. Third thing, I think any solution we give, and by we, I mean governments and organizations, has to have three aspects to it for people to accept it. It cannot have just one and make it look bright, and then it doesn't have the others. And the three are, I think, environmentally, which is what most people focus on. Second thing, socially and fiscally. If these elements are there in any solution, then you're almost guaranteed acceptance. And wherever you don't see acceptance is that it's either socially not acceptable to have, for example, 150-meter turbines in the middle of wherever. If it's not socially acceptable, you will not succeed, although it's a brilliant idea as wind energy. And finally, I think one of the biggest problems with any, if you listen to any country talking on the environment or any society, I think there is a huge gap, unfortunately, there's a huge gap between intention and action. Everybody's intention is good. Everybody loves to save the environment. It's like Vision Oman 2040. Vision Oman 2040, you open any email in Oman, especially government, the logo is there, the announcement is there, everything is there in place. But action-wise, half the people don't even know what Vision Oman is. So unless we combine our intention with our actions, none of what we talk about is going to see the light of day. Thank you very much. And sorry for taking too long.
No, that's very interesting. Thank you very much. I think before the next question, I think I would, if that's okay, I'd like to sort of address your excellent points. I didn't miss that. I didn't mention those, and I think they're linked, but absolutely vital. All species, I totally agree with you. That is absolute. We cannot consider ourselves in isolation, and we are interdependent, as you rightly said. So I absolutely agree with that. We really need to look at surviving collectively, as you rightly said. The other aspect, what I'd like to bring in on your second point, is there is an aspect of culture. One thing I have noticed that in the West, the culture has become individualistic. The person, me, is more important than us. And that is a very bad devolution. And it covers exactly what you mentioned. The culture in Oman, and perhaps the wider Muslim Arab world, is that the group is more important than the individual. That is the old way of thinking. And that is much more, it's much a better way of, an easier way of looking at collectivity, is by considering that the individual is less important than the group. And the group can be as big as you wish. And your 3 points for acceptability, I totally agree with you. The expression is, wind farms are great, but not in my backyard, thank you. And so the social aspect is, yeah, if you don't have it, you have a battle. And every single wind farm in the UK goes through years of battling. People say, yeah, it's a great idea, but I just don't want it here, thanks very much. It's going to mess up this, that, and the other. And we have to, again, it goes back to individual and collective. Yes, I accept it's going to look pretty bad, but we need it. And of course, financially, fiscally, unless it works, it's not going to happen. And the final point you made, totally agree. There's sadly quite a lot of greenwashing globally. People are talking green, but not acting green. And where people do not know, I think it goes back to the thing of education. But thank you very much. Those were very good points, and I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mohammed Al-Raziqi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matt. I hope my sound is clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Matt, for your very important talk on sustainability and the way forward. We all agreed on pressing environmental changes, and it happens everywhere now. We see it in the TVs. We see it in real life events, like we see floods, droughts, heat waves in Europe's part of the world, and fisheries loss. We also see sometimes diseases that it comes recently. We see dengue fevers. It happens in different countries. Malaria also it happens because of climate change. So all countries, including Oman, they all agreed on limiting the issues of climatic devastations from industries, from human practices, from agriculture, and they all agreed about reducing temperatures above the pre-industrial level of 1.05. And also in Oman, for example, there are many initiatives. Of course, I think it's a global initiatives, including circular economy, including also renewable energies, hydrogen energies. I just received a WhatsApp about the counts of renewable energies. In science, what we see, they are also modeling climate. So that by this, they could also identify areas of bigger impacts. What countries could have a bigger impact. It's been modeled by scientists, by econometrics. Dr. Ramin, he talked about Oman visions, and I think this is, there are big initiatives, including industries, including eco-friendly practices for industries, for behavioral change. And I think, as you said, resilience will come. The way forward is to have a more resilient structures. Oman, I think, is targeting 10% by 2025. So my question here, let's say it's about Oman, it's about the global initiatives in different areas, including agriculture, industrial initiatives. How you assess the global efforts and commitments from different countries through all this scientific knowledge and modeling of climatic effects, how you assess the global efforts to combat climate change. As you say, there must be kind of partnership between the nations, the UN nations, to combat the climate change. What's the role of science, the role of different institutions, including educators, as you said in your speech, including the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, including industries, private sectors. How about the students and the youths to combat the climate change? I think without technology, without this partnership, it will be very hard for some countries, especially the SIDS, small island developing states and least developed countries, to take all the risk of climate effects in a real life proactivity or maybe even reactions. So thank you very much for your talk, and thanks a lot for all the information knowledge we received from you. Thanks, Rihan.
Thank you very much. You bring out an essential point. That is absolute. Who is responsible? And where do we take responsibility beyond personal national interests? I totally agree. There are bodies that should be able to take it. The UN has multiple organizations which affect this, but they have no authority to do so. So perhaps a way forward would be to give authority, give the money, and create a global agreement that is really binding rather than a lot of talking. But that is a good point. Without this is cohesion. Unless we have the cohesion of agreement of people, whatever individuals do, it will have less impact. But thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. That's yeah, very good point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. We have another question or intervention from Mr. Khalil Al-Blushi. Please go ahead.
Almost good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you, Matt. We met in person, I think, during the Oman Sustainability Week last year, and it is coming up next week. So it's good to see you. On the UN and agreement and on this, I would like to mention here that one of the UN bodies, which is International Maritime Organization, has started with a regulation actually to tackle the CO2 emissions on ships. Although the sea maritime or sea transport contributes only to 3, I say only because it is 3, but it is huge, obviously. 3% only, but there is a clear mandate from IMO to tackle this. Starting from actually this year. So 1st January 2023, every company, every ship had to have a study, a certificate. And this is an external body comes on board and checks your certificate and then rate you where you are from A, B, C, D, E. If you are in D and E, then you have, if you are in D, you have to have within 3 years a clear plan to be implemented for you to come within the acceptable limit. And this is going to affect your tradability. So people are kind of forced to do it. So it is one way of tackling. And I agree, they have to start with regulations, because voluntary, only, I don't know, 1% maybe people will voluntarily go into doing it, because it involves lots of cost. So investment need to be allocated for this. So this is from the binding point of view. Again, I heard last week a very nice matrix where countries are being kind of rated on say-do ratio. How much you are saying to how much you are actually doing is a good rating now for countries, which is I think important, because lots of say but not much do is happening. When it comes to Oman, I know for a fact that there is a group of people. They are establishing a kind of green center of excellence. That's a beautiful move, I think, because then we bring all the stakeholders, all the expertise, and start discussing things. But talking about the investment, for example, now I saw that there are 11 hydrogen projects in Oman, and I think they are the second after Egypt. But 11 means lots of investment. So what I think is required is action priority matrix. So what can give us the highest impact with the least effort in terms of resources? That is where we can bring the maximum. So if you look at industries, for example, look at Sohar. You cannot decarbonize Oman without decarbonizing Sohar because of the industries there. So we already identified an area of priority. So things like this need to be done, because you don't have unlimited money, you don't have unlimited resources. So this, the action priority matrix is very important to be embedded in our plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You bring some very good points there. IMO is doing very good work, not only with the regulation of emissions, but also perhaps the Maritime Treaty for controlling waters. It is, 3% is actually a lot. It's a huge amount. And it has a deep impact. It will affect people. It will affect tradability, as you rightly say. The say and do aspect is the thing that we have to control. People can say anything they want, but if they don't do it, it's a complete waste of time. The prioritization, I think, is absolutely essential. There are areas that we may never be able to address totally. There are areas that we cannot afford to address before we have technology to find a replacement. That is absolute. In terms of investment, I think Oman is looking at something in the region of $30 billion for hydrogen investment. That is pretty significant. And I think it is absolutely right. It's a good start. And, you know, Gutek, Sultan Qaboos University and the government are becoming greener. That is certain, and it will follow. But it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So I think your principal point there was the priority. What is going to make the biggest impact quickest without detrimental impact to those affected by the change? Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you very much. We will move to the chat to see some questions there. So we'll start by Mr. Hamad Al-Wahabi. So he has a lot of questions. So the first question, he's saying, is there enough water? He's saying this is a philosophical question. So he's saying, is there enough water in the world for 2050 or 2100? So this is his first question. And his second question is, again, if indigenous water management technologies can be used to combat current water security and sustainability problems in the face of climate change. So this is the second question. And his third question is saying that, can the desalination techniques solve the water security issues? Why or why not? So these are the three questions that he's asking. And go one by one. Thank you.
Of course. Very interesting. I might have to refer to the chats for some of those. The first question, is there enough water? Yes, there is more than enough water in the world. It is a paradox. We have, if you take a cubic kilometer of water in the sea, that is enough for the whole world. There are 1 trillion litres of water in that. That is enough. So it's not a question of enough water, it's a question of the availability, the access to it. That is the challenge, in my view. I'm very sorry, could you remind me of the second point? In fact, I have them here. Is there enough water? Second one.
It had to do with desalination.
Yes, if ancient indigenous water management technologies can be used to combat current water and sustainability in the face of climate change, yes, they can. Yes, absolutely. The old methodologies of diverting water, harnessing water, gathering water can, but not on the same scale. I would suggest we would have to increase that exponentially, because the ancient indigenous water management were based on a population which was tiny. I mean, the population has tripled in a century, and although there is evidence that population increases decline, the basic technologies are good, but probably would need a massive increase, and perhaps that's what we're doing with desalination. Desalination, yes, I would think it can, as long as we can adapt to the pollution problems that result from desalination. So desalination, firstly, you've got brine, the salt water, which is a problem. The salt needs to be got rid of. Also, the earth is deeply polluted. The seas are deeply polluted. So when you take the water, take the salt out, it's still dirty water. So what do you do with that pollution? But desalination is certainly the way. We can take, you know, 1 billion tons of water out of the oceans every day with no noticeable effect. It's rather the same with the taking water from air. I've been asked the question, will it affect the local climate? No, it won't. There is a huge amount of water in the air at any time, and you can take as much as you want, and it will have no impact. I hope those answers the questions. Very good points. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
on the water for the ocean, the plastic. There are some studies show that there are 2 million tons of plastic in the ocean. Like 2 million tons of plastic in the South Atlantic, I think. The area of plastic that discovered is huger than so many countries in Europe, in area-wise.
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
I totally agree with you. And I would think it is as important as reducing carbon emissions is to stop the plastic pollution, but also we've got to pick up all the plastic in the ocean. I mean, I've seen machines that do it, but you know, they can cover, I don't know, 1 square kilometer in a week. Yeah, it's great, but I mean, it's not going to touch the figures that you mentioned at all. That takes something beyond the technology that we have at the moment. So the first thing, we've got to stop making it worse. But it's a very interesting point.
Again, back to IMO again, there's a treaty, a convention actually signed by so many countries, more than 160 countries, I think. And it has like 6 chapters. Chapter numbers 5, I think, is about also plastic, what to do with the plastic. Now they've found also technologies where you can incinerate it to make it small, to make manageable, to kind of carry it with you until you reach somewhere instead of just dumping it on the boat. So there are regulations, and there are some countries where they have the technologies where they check the density of the water, whether there is a change if a ship has passed there and they dump anything and all that. So this is all to do with tackling the wastage from ships.
That is a very, very encouraging development. It's a very good idea. But there's one thing I would also like to mention is going back to the education of children. You know, instead of punishing, perhaps we should reward. So instead of saying, look, if you do this wrong, you get punished, you should say, well, if you do this well, you will be rewarded. And it's something I'm trying to bring in other aspects. In UK, there are too many laws, and they're not enforceable. So instead of trying to punish somebody for doing it wrong, try to reward people for doing it right. I know it shouldn't be necessary. It should be a social responsibility, but that may be a way of dealing with it. So people can be encouraged to do it because they will be benefiting from it, whether it is, I don't know, tax reductions or something. Maybe that's an idea. I don't know what you think.
If you're asking me, I think it is a brilliant idea. I mean, psychologically, they say if you tell a child, don't run, it doesn't mean anything. You should tell them, walk slowly. It is the positive side of it that sticks in mind, not the negative. I mean, the human tendency is to shortcut things, yeah.
No, I totally agree. If you tell a child not to do something, they're going to be very curious as to why they shouldn't do it. So they're going to try it anyway. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very interesting.
Thank you very much. Mr. Khalid Al-Amri, تفضل.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matt, for the interesting talk. My question is how to strike a balance between a country resources. Let's say Oman, the whole economy is around fossil fuels, using natural resources, mining, and other natural resources, and also, you know, striking a balance in a sense, preserving the environment, complying with the sustainability regulation, ESG, and the international standards. And you know, basically, Oman, the whole economy is revolved around the natural resources. And not to mention that the whole world now, they are competing in their, you know, competitive advantage on the various skills, and it's very hard to implement the all sort of environment protection and competing with others, especially when it comes complying with those laws. It doesn't come at a free cost. So you know, I was wondering, is there like a regulatory incentive should be there? How you going to play with the same rules against your opponents? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that is a fundamental question. It is the interest of people. If you base an economy on a certain thing and then you're told you've got to change, a lot of people will lose a lot of money, and that is a big incentive for not doing it, which is totally respected. And it's the same as the first question, which was for the environmental, social, and fiscal aspects of it. This is the important bit. If people can't afford to do it, they won't. It's like an analogy is in the UK, eat more healthily. Great, but healthy foods cost more than the unhealthy foods. So if people have limited resources, they're going to buy the unhealthy foods simply because they cannot afford to change. So absolutely agree. We have to try to reward, but how do you reward it without money? You can't say, right, Oman, you need to stop fossil fuels tomorrow, and somebody will pay your entire GDP in compensation. It's not going to happen. It can happen slowly, but there will be countries that cannot change without compensation. It's a very, very difficult balance. It's a very good point, and it's one I agree with, but I really don't know how to answer that yet. Certainly something to think about.
Thank you very much. We can go back again to the chat. So there's a question from Mr. Khalid Al-Kiyani. He's saying, good afternoon. You mentioned that Oman has a good humidity level of around 60%, which could be a source of water. Could you give example of a country applying a technology to benefit from humidity successfully?
No, I can't as yet, because I don't think there are any. The only country which has been using it quite a lot is South Africa, where they managed to relieve the drought in Cape Town by using atmospheric water generation, which is the technology. But it's never going to be a strategic resource. It'll only be a tactical supplement, but it could be the difference between stress and non-stress. So, for example, a water from air machine from the South African company, he's got up to 2,000 litres per day with 88% humidity. So he guarantees 1,000 litres per day. So you can see that even 10 machines is only 10,000 litres per day, but the water comes out filtered and clean, absolutely pure water. But you can have these things in your home. So, you know, a water cooler needs to be cleaned, needs to have the bottles replaced, plastic bottles. It's a great thing, but these machines domestically are the size of a water cooler, but simply take the water out of the air. So, and you can produce 20 to 30 litres in your home. As an example, Spa in South Africa, at their main site in Durban, changed from water coolers to atmospheric water generators, and they saved $47,000 in the first year. So all the people that went around changing the water bottles, the people that had to bring the water bottles in, change them, store them, all that space was relieved. All the workers could then be retrained, and it was a great thing. It would have been a lot more, of course, but for power, they had no resource to alternative energy, so they had to use grid systems. That's expensive, which is why my concept of focusing on tactical water, but with green energy, has to be a way forward. But to go back to your question, I don't believe there's any country yet that has made a big impact with this, because it's simply a question of the balance between output and energy cost. I did see that in Dukum, I think Renaissance have started a system which has a solar panel and an atmospheric water generator. So that does take up a lot of space. Each one produces a number of litres per day, but that is a start point to it. And this is what I'm hoping to introduce on a slightly different scale to Oman, where it focuses on water and then brings in alternative energy around it. Sorry, I'm going on a bit there. Your question was not yet, and will never be strategic, but it can be a very useful tactical supplement, if that answers the question.
Thank you very much. I'll take the other question from Nawal Al-Uraymi. She's saying, for institutes or organizations to implement the strategy, they tend to implement or use the solar power for energy source. But I guess sometimes we need to review our practices in using the current energy like gases and electricity. How to balance or assess between both?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the last bit of the question.
Yeah, so yeah, she's trying to, so she's saying for institutes or organizations to implement this strategy, they tend to implement or use the solar power for energy source, for example. But I guess sometimes we need to review our practices in using the current energy, whatever we are using now, like gases and electricity. So she's saying like how to assess between both practices.
Very good question. This is absolutely part of the change and the impact that will come with it. So this has to be through leadership. You have to encourage the changes. We have got to adapt, but people will be reluctant to adapt without incentive. So again, I really think this comes from leadership, which in my view in Oman, it's one of the strongest, but you've got to lead by example. To make an impact, you have to accept a negative impact, which may be cost, maybe social impact, environmental impact, and it's simply something that has to go forward. But it is something that people should study. You should say, right, we want this to happen. These are the options. However, what effect will this have? How can we help the effect? How can we help people adapt without great penalty onto them? If that answers it. But yeah, very good point.
Thank you very much. I think we have covered all the questions in the chat. Thank you, Nawal. Is there any question?
Can I give?
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to give an example, practical example of what on the last question. The incentives, for example, if we want to encourage people to buy electric cars now, and the simplest car would cost you much more than the normal cars now. So the government can give incentives, tax cuts, and encourage people to have it in that manner. Make it mandatory, for example, for certain areas, petrol stations now, but maybe prominent areas where you have to have, for example, at least 5-10 stations to charge the car. So that is where it comes, the incentive part from the authorities, where individuals then they can follow in an easier way to adapt these technologies. If people want to do solar panel now, the return on your investment takes a lot of years for you to get back to that level. It should be slowly, I mean, cheaper and affordable. And this is what is going to happen in the long run, but it is not now. So the first movers will have to kind of risk it. The first movers, they have to take the burden of it and so on.
Totally agree with that. But there's another aspect, that is a very good point. That is, tax cuts incentive is a very good way to do it. But there is something with electric cars. We must go to electric cars. It makes perfect sense. The thing that I don't see has been necessarily addressed is where's the electricity coming from? If you take a massive comparative study, if every car in America, United States, changed to electricity tomorrow, the grid system would have to be 15 times greater than it currently is. And as it's already challenged by, I mean, the smallest storm, there'll be a problem. So to increase it by 15 is something that, to me, does not appear to have been planned. So it's something to think about. But also, the charging places take up space. Is there enough space? Just as a thought, but yeah, you make a very good point.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there any question that any of our participants would like to raise before we close our session? Great. So, Mr. Matt, I'll give you the last, the summary, to summarize this session before we close. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. It was a huge pleasure and delightfully challenging questions, some of which I don't think I answered, some of which I may simply have agreed with and given some thoughts. The questions represent exactly the challenge. You have identified what the impacts are, what the effects of change will be. But whatever those effects are, they have to be less than the alternative, which is we will not survive. That has to be the alternative. So we have to make sure that the environmental, social, and fiscal impacts are minimized or made in such a way that they become acceptable simply because they are the only way forward. So it's a sustainable future, a resilient, sustainable future, or sadly, there isn't one. I'm sorry to sound bleak, but, and I think everybody here is focused on making sure that we go for the better alternative. But thank you very much indeed for your time. Once again, it is my pleasure, my honor to be in Oman, and thank you very much.
Thank you, dear guests. We have reached to the end of our session today. Thank you, Mr. Matt, for the very interesting talk, and thank you, our guests, for your participation, and see you next Saturday with a new topic. Until then, keep safe and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.